Good morning, everyone, and welcome to WorkCover Queensland's webinar on suitable duties. In today's session, we'll be discussing the benefits of suitable duties, what goes into developing a suitable duties plan, and we'll outline some of the support that's available to employers to help facilitate this process. My name is Tim Meadows, and I'm the Specialist Lead Return to Work here at WorkCover Queensland, and I'll be your host and co-presenter today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Yugara and Turrbal peoples as the traditional custodians of the land in which we work and are speaking from today. We thank them and their elders, past and present, for their ongoing connection to land, waters, culture, and community. Okay, so on to some housekeeping for today. This session will be recorded and you will be provided with a link later on to that recording, along with a copy of the slide pack that we'll go through today. And a short survey for you, for us to gather your feedback on today's session. The session will also be uploaded to the WorkCover Queensland YouTube channel and will be shared via our usual socials. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar using the questions panel on the top right of your screen. And if time permits, we'll do our best to answer some of those questions at the end of the webinar. And we'll also address some of the questions that have been submitted as people have registered for the webinar. Just a note, we're unable to answer any specific policy or claim questions. So if you do have questions of that nature, we encourage you to contact either your policies relationship manager, if you do have one, or reach out to the customer advisor who might be handling your claim. Or if you have more general inquiries, we also have our 1300 contact number where we can answer any more general type queries. And just finally, if you have any technical issues, please refer to the help information for GoToMeeting, which you should be able to find at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I'd now like to introduce today's guest presenter, Michelle Maclean. Michelle is an occupational therapist who has additional qualifications in ergonomics, health and safety, driving, mediation, and access consulting. She works with WorkCover, employers, and other schemes within Southeast Queensland and regional areas to assist with optimal injury prevention and rehabilitation services. Welcome, Michelle, and thanks so much for taking the time to present for us today.
Thanks, Tim.
Before I begin, I'd just like to remind our listeners that any of the information that we share today by myself or Michelle is general information only and should not be taken as medical advice. Okay, so here's a quick overview of what we'll get through over the next hour. We'll talk about the importance of early return to work and the benefits for you as an employer in encouraging early return to work. We'll go over the basics of suitable duties. Michelle will talk a little bit more about developing suitable duties plans, and then we'll talk about some of the more challenging situations where perhaps it's more difficult to find suitable duties or if there's no suitable duties available and some of the options that are available. And as I mentioned, we hopefully at the end will have time to cover off on your questions, and then we'll finish things up with a couple of key takeaways for you from today's session. So why are we here today? Why are we talking about the value of early return to work? So the next couple of slides will talk about why early return to work is so important for injured workers. So there's a lot of research that's really well established now that shows that getting a worker back to work as soon as possible is a really vital part of their recovery. And importantly, it's important to note that this is the same whether this is a physical injury or a claim for a psychological injury as well. The same principles apply, that getting someone back into the workforce as early as possible has really good benefits for both the worker and for you as an employer. Some research published by the Royal Australasian College of Physicians tells us really clearly that the longer that a worker stays away from work, the less likely they are to ever go back to work. And so you can see some of that data there below. So for those people who are unable to work for 20 days due to injury, they have a 70% chance of returning to work. When we go out to 45 days, which is only just over 6 weeks off work, that probability of returning to work drops to 50%. And if someone requires 70 days off work or is away from the workplace for 70 days, the chances of them ever returning to the work drops right down to 35%. So you can see there that data is really quite striking in terms of how important it is that someone is brought back into the workplace early in terms of getting a great outcome. Okay, so it's not always easy to return workers back to their normal job, particularly if you're a smaller business who might not have a different range of roles available. And so as I mentioned, while an early return to work is proven and shown by the research to be far better for workers than staying at home to recover, depending on the nature of the injury, that might mean that it's not always safe or possible for workers to do the tasks that are part of their normal job or role. And that's where suitable duties come in, and that's what we'll talk about this morning. And so by offering suitable duties, employers can increase that prospect of that earlier recovery and a good outcome. And that's obviously great news for the worker themselves to be reintegrated back into that workforce, but also for your business as well. And we'll go into, in the slides coming up, a little bit more of the detail about some of the benefits as to why that's great for both your workers and your business. Employers also have a responsibility when they work with WorkCover and when there is a work-related injury to help injured workers return to work safely. And there's a resource available there which you'll be able to link to when you receive a copy of the slides, which provides some guidelines for the standard of rehabilitation and some guiding principles to follow as an employer when helping injured workers back to work. Okay, so you'll hear this term early intervention quite a bit. We talk about it and we try and focus on it a lot in our claims management. And what does that mean? So planning a worker's return to work as soon as possible after they've been injured is what we call early intervention. And it's really important that an employer supports their worker immediately in the right way, because if they do that, they're more likely to recover quickly and able to get back to work safely. And that leads to those better outcomes that I talked about. And in terms of how you do that, it's really quite simple. You don't need to sort of overcomplicate things, but the best early intervention methods that we see, and that again, there's evidence that shows that supportive employers tend to get really good outcomes from injury and claims management. It's simple things like making contact quickly with someone who sustained an injury. That could be a quick phone call to check in and see how they're going, or you could go out to see them, or you could arrange for them to come in and visit you. Really make that communication personalised, show that you care and that you support that worker. I think what we hear all the time, and certainly what we see when for those employers that make the effort to keep in early and regular contact with people who've sustained an injury, show that they're supported and that they would like them to come back to work, those people feel much more motivated to come back to work. And inevitably what we see is those people do get back to work. They recover more quickly and you get better claims outcomes overall. So really, really simple. It's just about showing your workers that they're supported and that you care about them, and keeping those communication lines open really early will go a long way. And then for more tips about early intervention, we have an employer return to work guide available on our website, and that's a really quick, it's a 2-page document. It provides some really practical advice, including a checklist. So if you're an employer who's never had a WorkCover claim before, or only had limited experience in that space, the 1-page checklist is a really easy and quick to follow set of guidelines that you can share with yourself as the rehab and return to work coordinator, or with a supervisor, to really encourage that early return to work and support workers back into the workplace. Okay, we'll now cover off a little bit around the basics of suitable duties. So we'll talk about what are suitable duties and what is their purpose. So suitable duties, which you might also hear called alternative duties. So they are identified tasks that an injured worker can safely perform at work while they are recovering from a work-related injury or illness. And as you can see from this image here, so it's really a collaborative and consultative process. So suitable duties are agreed between the worker and their employer, but then there's also consultation that happens with WorkCover and the treating doctors and allied health providers. So that could be a physiotherapist, or it could be a psychologist, depending on the type of injury. But it very much is a collaborative and consultative type process to make sure that we are developing the right suitable duties that work for both the worker and the employer and are approved by the medical and allied health providers as well. So what sorts of things should we consider while planning suitable duties? So it's important that suitable duties are both meaningful and suited to a worker's physical or psychological and cognitive capacities, including things such as their age, perhaps their education, their experience, and their training as well. Important that they're meaningful as well. So it's important that when the worker comes in to perform suitable duties that they feel like they are adding value and doing valuable work that's contributing, as opposed to just coming in and doing, very less meaningful type work. And so suitable duties should also take into account the nature of the worker's incapacity for work and their pre-injury role. So when we talk about their incapacity, the treating doctors might indicate some restrictions that might be appropriate depending on that person's injury or illness. So that could include things like maybe it's a lifting restriction if they perform manual type work. It could be limited time on particular tasks to minimize repetition. It could be more regular break times. It could be a range of things that are indicated by the treating doctor. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the medical information is key. We need to make sure that whatever suitable duties we are having someone complete is appropriate for their injury and their stage of recovery. We certainly don't want to be overdoing things and putting people at risk of re-injury or aggravating a condition. So it's important that the medical information is taken into account. You need to consider your own workplace rehabilitation policies and procedures to ensure that they're being followed appropriately. Or it may be that if you're an employer who has multiple different locations or areas of business, you might have suitable duties that are available at another location other than the primary workplace. And if that's the case, it's important to think about the reasonableness of whether a worker can attend that other location or not. So again, it's a real collaboration and consultation to make sure that those duties suit where the worker's at in their recovery, what the medical providers are saying is appropriate, and also works for yourself as an employer as well. So the main aim of suitable duties is really to help workers recover and safely build their fitness and their capacity to return back to their normal duties and work hours. And that's always our goal when we're helping someone recover, is to help them return to the workplace, recover from their injury and move on with their life. And suitable duties play a really key role in that process. The other things that they can do is increase work tolerance. So that includes increasing capacity to perform jobs with specific physical demands. When we talk to injured workers, it's really important that we emphasise that the act of returning to work and gradually getting back into those physical activities is a form of rehabilitation and recovery in itself. So provided that they are working within the restrictions that have been provided and working safely within those limits, it's another way of thinking about their rehabilitation. And what it does do is it improves their physical or their mental endurance by getting gradually back into that routine of doing work. It helps provide, structure and routine back to people's lives as well by getting back into the workplace. Obviously, when people who are off work for a long period of time, they often fall out of that helpful structure and routine to their days, and it can be quite difficult to get people back into those routines if they've been away for a long period of time. So again, that early return to work is key to help make that process a lot easier. And then from a community and social interaction point of view, suitable duties have great benefits by ensuring that workers are engaging back in that social atmosphere at work, keeping contact with their co-workers. As you can imagine, being off work for long periods of time potentially can be a pretty lonely experience, and that can lead to other psychological type impacts that complicate things and make outcomes worse as well. So there's that real social and community importance of returning back to the workforce as well. Okay, so what are the benefits for suitable duties? I've touched on some of them just on those slides there in terms of why they're beneficial for both you as an employer and also for your injured workers as well. But we'll go into a little bit more detail now. There is workplace culture type benefits to providing suitable duties. So workplaces who have a supportive culture when people have an injury, where the workers feel supported and welcomed back into the workplace after injury, that has real flow-on effects for the other staff in that area. Again, working with various employers over the years, you really notice the ones who do have that really supportive workplace culture of bringing injured people back in by suitable duties. It actually benefits more than just the injured person themselves. It actually has really strong workplace cultural benefits as well. And that has productivity benefits for you as a business too. It helps you keep levels of skills and expertise in the workplace. So sometimes we see scenarios where a really experienced or like a leader or a valuable member of the team is injured, and we're able to bring them back into workplaces, perhaps not doing the physical elements of their job, but taking on more of a training or a mentoring type role. And so by utilising those sorts of options, that gives you that opportunity to make sure that you can still utilise their levels of skill and their expertise and their influence on other workers as well. Minimises retraining expenses for you as a business. That's obviously a really costly and time-consuming process to bring new people on board. And so by really thinking about the duties that an injured person can do, you don't need to be recruiting and training and onboarding new staff, which I'm sure you know is very costly, takes extra resources and costs a lot of money as well. So you minimise those expenses. And then from a premium point of view, early return to work leads to earlier recovery, which leads to lower claims costs, and then lower claims costs for you as a premium payer will often mean that your premium is reduced as well. So it really is a win-win sort of scenario for your workers and also for yourselves by getting people back into suitable duties early. So to show you a practical example of what we're talking about here, we'd like to share a quick video with you. So this is an example of suitable duties in action, and this is Giada and Mateo's story.
Giada is a big part of La Macelleria. She's the manager, she also our cake designer. Obviously, when I heard about the injury, it was kind of a shock.
As many people in hospitality, I had some issues related to repetitive strain injuries. And so what happened is that after 18 years doing this job, I kind of developed carpal tunnel in both hands and my elbow. I had some issues in terms of tennis and golf elbow, epicondylitis. I arrived to a point that I couldn't sleep much because it's a nerve kind of issue. Working was getting very difficult.
We decided better to stop, figure it out a plan. You can take sick leave, holidays until we figure it out, and then basically WorkCover came into place.
I received both carpal tunnel release surgery, both wrists, and I received 4 injections in my elbow.
So one, Giada got some clearance from her specialist post-surgery, and then WorkCover sent through a referral to come out and assist with just clarifying if there was some duties she could do within the workplace.
I basically decided whatever was possible to do. Also, I was very keen to come back to work because staying home was a little too much for me, not doing anything.
She's pretty active and she can stay still, so it was really important to find the duties where the hands were not involved.
So sometimes a suitable duty can also be alternate duties that is not within her normal duties. So for Giada, it was doing more mentoring of other staff of how to make gelato, which wasn't part of her normal role.
So basically it was just supervising, give a hand to new staff member and take care of that side of the business.
My job is still tied to using my hands a lot, and so with a double surgery like that, honestly, I couldn't pay rent. So I'm extremely grateful. It was big help for my family.
It's really important to stay connected. They want to actually be involved and feel that you are present and you want to help them through recovering and come back to the workplace.
Okay, so you can see that as a great example of thinking about the what a person can do while they're injured as opposed to what they can't do, and really making sure that they're reintegrated back into the workplace in an early and safe manner. So we'd like to hear from you now with a quick poll. So here's the question, which you should just be able to answer as it pops up, which is, have you yourself had to develop, or have you developed a suitable duties plan before? So I'll just give you a minute or so to respond to that question. Okay. All right, well, it looks like around 80% of you have developed a suitable duties plan before, which is great. But we've got 20% of people in the audience who've never created a suitable duties plan before. So this is a great opportunity now for me to hand over to Michelle Maclean to talk about how to develop suitable duties plans and some of the practical elements of that process.
Thanks, Tim. So yes, I'm wanting to have a chat about now what is a suitable duties program, and to get into the nitty-gritty so that if you're having to develop one, you know the tools and techniques to develop a successful one. So a suitable duties plan or program, which is often abbreviated to SDP, is an official document that clearly sets out the tasks an injured worker will do as part of their job while they get better and recover. So who develops a plan? Usually the rehabilitation and return to work coordinators at the workplace will develop the suitable duties program in conjunction with the injured worker, their treating team and WorkCover. If there are no return to work coordinators available or an employer is unsure how to develop a plan, then WorkCover or an independent return to work provider such as myself can also assist in putting a plan together. One question I would answer there in terms of when should an SDP be developed, my response would be as soon as possible. So usually that can be triggered by an injured worker bringing in a medical certificate to the workplace, or they may even just have a letter from either their treating doctor, a physio or psychologist. That can often initiate the suitable duties program. What goes into a suitable duties plan? So we want to see the main contacts. So who is everyone? Who's the worker, the rehabilitation coordinator's name, the work supervisor, and the doctor, because these people will become important in the process as it continues. We want to see start, completion and review dates, and that helps to provide a timeline of recovery that everyone can work off throughout the injured worker's recovery. The timeframes for expected stages of recovery and return to work opportunities should ideally match with what the doctor advises on the workers' compensation certificate, but as we'll discuss later, sometimes that information isn't available, so we need to draw on other resources, which we'll address in a little bit. There should be clear and appropriate objectives with considerations for how these are going to be achieved. So whether we're supporting the injured worker leading up to their surgery or whether we're supporting them to get back to their pre-injury duties, that really should be outlined quite clearly as to what the suitable duties program is upgrading the injured worker to. The tasks and the duties to be performed and any tasks that will change along the program. And I'd also specify there exactly what the injured worker's role may be, because it may not be their pre-injury role. So having that detailed in the plan as well. The days and hours of work, and ensuring that this is exclusive of break times. This is probably one of the questions that I often receive as a return to work provider. Hours of work in the suitable duties programs do not include break times. The limitations or restrictions. So again, this may be advised by the doctor on a workers' comp medical certificate, or it may not be. They ideally should be specific to the tasks that obviously we're outlining in the suitable duties program. whether any training is required for the injured worker to do the suitable duties, and along with that, any PPE, personal protective equipment that needs to be provided for them to do those duties that may be different to their pre-injury role. And then the signatures. So ensuring there's an area on the plan where everyone can sign off and approve the program. So that includes the injured worker, the return to work coordinator or the employer contact, the work supervisor and the treating doctor. So we should be able to see all of those things identified in a suitable duties program. What you're seeing at the moment is an example of a suitable duties program that WorkCover has on the WorkSafe website. Now this can be downloaded and used as a write-on document, a Word document, and it outlines all those points that we've just discussed in terms of having the contact details of the injured worker, the supervisor, the treating medical practitioner, those plan details of the timelines, the goals, and then detailing week by week what those tasks, duties and restrictions would be. The timeline of the suitable duties, how many weeks it goes for, often is very variable depending on the injured worker's recovery, but mostly it's also linked to the workers' compensation medical certificate timeframes. But yes, I strongly encourage you to download that document if you haven't already, because it can be very useful to develop suitable duties programs. So reviewing programs and gradually increasing duties. So the goal of all of our suitable duties programs, or STPs, is to gradually upgrade an injured worker back to their pre-injury role. Our goal is always looking at the hierarchy of return to work, where ideally we want to work with people getting them back to the same employer, same role as paramount. If that's not possible, then we'll get them back to the same employer, different role, and then a different employer, same role, and then different employer, different role. So those objectives should be clearly linked to one of those hierarchy goals. So the timeline, again, just touching a bit more deeply on that, the timeline for completing this is mostly dependent on the medical recovery timeframes for a particular injury. Although at times, timeframes on STP can be influenced by surgery dates or medical investigations that might be upcoming. It might be when the injured worker is having their next treating specialist review or GP appointment. We may be advised by WorkCover a certain finalisation date, and that can impact on the suitable duties timeframe. And other types of capacity the injured worker may have may also impact that progression of a suitable duties program timeline. For example, it could be removal of a plaster cast or an upgrade back to driving, which will impact on their tasks and restrictions that we can put in the suitable duties program. So gradual progressions of capacity is tailored for physical or psychological injuries, representing that gradual step up of tolerance. So for example, if we're looking at a physical injury, we may progress things in terms of weight, ranges or reach distances. And there also may be other avenues from complexity of tasks or psychological injuries where we're looking at different levels of support and assistance that they may provide throughout the suitable duties program. So that one on the right-hand side, sorry, just provides an example of that type of progression that we would see, where we would clearly have identified what the weight may be that may come from the actual medical certificate itself, the range, the reach, and then the different tasks and how we would upgrade that over a 4-week period.
So in terms of how WorkCover can support you, as we mentioned at the start, development of suitable duties is a real collaborative effort. And so how WorkCover can help you if you're planning suitable duties for one of your injured workers, we can act as a liaison, I suppose, between your worker, yourselves, and the treating providers who are involved. You may not always have written authority from your worker to liaise directly with their treating doctors or their treating physio or psychologist, for example. And so that's where your WorkCover customer advisor plays a key role in connecting all of those parties to make sure that everyone has the most relevant information and can really move the process forward by involving everyone, collecting the key information and getting that suitable duties plan developed and approved. We've also got a range of resources available on our website, so including that return to work guide that I touched on earlier, the suitable duties program template that Michelle just went through. And we've also got a list of job task analyses and return to work checklists for different roles across different industries, which might be helpful to give you a bit of a starting point in terms of thinking about the job tasks and the requirements of individual roles for different industries. And our customer advisors are very experienced in just having conversations around challenges you might be facing or how to actually bring someone back into the workplace. They deal with these sorts of things day in, day out. A lot of them are developing suitable duties programs themselves. And so by all means, if you are feeling a little bit stuck or not sure, give your customer advisor a call and they should be able to help you move things forward. And then the other opportunity we have is to engage a return to work provider such as Michelle. Michelle will talk a little bit more about what exactly that looks like, but that could be in a case where it is perhaps a more complex injury, or maybe you just don't have appropriate suitable duties, or that there is that sort of one-on-one face-to-face requirement of a range of suitable duties required. So I'll hand back over to Michelle now to talk about what that looks like and what exactly a return to work provider can do to assist.
Thanks, Tim. So what can a return to work provider do to assist? And these are in cases, as Tim said, we're not engaged on all matters or all statutory claims. We're often reserved for more complex injuries or industries where we can assist WorkCover and employers to develop those successful and sustainable suitable duties programs. Now, what happens when we're engaged? So WorkCover will send us a referral via an online portal. There are a group of return to work providers such as myself on tendered arrangements throughout all of Queensland. We're from various backgrounds. I'm obviously an occupational therapist, but there could also be physiotherapists, exercise physiologists, rehab counsellors and psychologists who are also available to assist with the return to work process. So as a starting point as a provider, we look at all the referral information provided by WorkCover and we start to understand or piece together the injured worker's recovery and what we need to assist with. So we look at things like the status and the extent of injury. We may get referrals at any point during an injured worker's recovery period. It may not be necessarily early on, although as Tim spoke about, before, looking at that early intervention is certainly optimal for everyone. So the sooner we can get it, the earlier we can commence our work. We look at the medical documentation if there has been any medical report received, but most often we're looking at that workers' compensation medical certificate. But then mostly we're also pulling together our industry and knowledge of suitable duties and upgrading points for various injuries and industries that we've worked with before. Once we've collated all that information, you will then likely hear, if you're a return to work coordinator, get a phone call from a return to work provider to start organising a workplace meeting. Now, let's talk about this work capacity certificate because it can be a bit troublesome for us where the details may not be ideally put in. But in an optimal world, we should be able to gauge a lot of information from the workers' compensation medical certificate. So some of the information that we should be able to see is whether the worker is actually fit for suitable duties or totally incapacitated, what hours and days the worker can perform, and what physical capacity the worker has, including any weight or reach distances. Now, unfortunately, in some cases, the medical certificate may not be provided or the details may be absent on there, which is where I guess the skill of the return to work provider, yourselves and WorkCover come into play to start developing that detail based on our past experience and knowledge of injury recovery and timeframes. Certainly, we have other people that are involved in the process, such as treating physios or psychologists who provide value-add information to give us that work capacity information. So then we start to develop the suitable duties program at a workplace or worksite assessment. And that's a meeting that we conduct at the workplace with the injured worker, the employer, and the return to work provider. So what can you do or an employer do to help prepare in advance for a worksite visit? Now, consider who is the most appropriate person from your organisation to attend. It may or may not be a manager, a supervisor, a line leader, a team leader, or the rehab coordinator. It's really important to make sure the person who has the best knowledge about what duties are available, what locations they might be available, the person that we have in that meeting, because that's where, as Tim said, also that collaborative and coordinated approach is conducted during that worksite meeting. So ensure the person that you allocate is familiar with the injured worker's role and those available suitable duties. So consider the alternate tasks, other locations, and even other brands if you are a larger business that we may be able to source for suitable duties options. Book a room, ensure that there's a private confidential area for the meeting to occur. There's nothing worse than trying to complete a worksite assessment in a tea room around break times where other people may be walking in and out of the meeting. And if possible, printing out and emailing through to the return to work provider a job task analysis or a suitable duties job bank prior to the meeting if you have that available. That's certainly very beneficial to give us an idea of how your workplace runs, and it gives us an additional knowledge to be able to go into that meeting and hit the ground running, which is far more beneficial. So the suitable duties program is then developed collaboratively with everyone in the meeting. If we've got all the right people involved in that meeting, then we should leave that meeting with the expectation and understanding of knowing exactly what that suitable duties program and upgrade is going to look like, and so that there's no surprises when the suitable duties program is emailed out to everyone that's in there. Okay, so then we start to seek our medical sign-off. So the sign-off may or may not be required prior to commencement of the plan, and that depends on the information in that work capacity medical certificate. There is a box where the doctor ticks and identifies if they are required to see the plan before starting, and that can then influence those timelines of when we may be able to commence. It's certainly very beneficial, irrespective of whether the doctor has ticked that box or not, to make sure, and certainly as a return to work provider, that we're circulating those plans to those significant key people in the injured workers recovery, and that the treating doctor, treating physio, psychologist, ex-phys may all be those people. So yes, certainly circulating that to everyone and asking for any feedback is valuable as well. So this is a different type of suitable duties program to the one that's available on the website, but you'll see again, it's all the same type of information that we want to be able to gauge from a return to work program. We've got the injured workers details, the employer details, the assessment details, and then starting to identify those objectives of what we're trying to get them back to, those pre-injury hours, that scope of role, and that may come from the task analysis, but mostly it will also come from that worksite assessment that we complete at the workplace. Treatment, so who else is the injured worker involved with at that time, and other useful information. We often include such details as like medications and past medical history. That can be very important, obviously, from a medical point of view, if we are looking at duties that may be a bit different to the injured worker's normal duties, and we need to understand if there's any impact from medications that they may be taking for the work-related injury, or if there's any past medical history that we need to take into account that we don't want to exacerbate or have any impact from the suitable duties programs that we might be suggesting. So then, yes, you'd see those different types of programs, hours, the duties and restrictions with the sign off on that final page that you would expect to have circulated to everyone. So hopefully that looks similar to some of those suitable duties that people have identified before. Now, what information can an employer provide to help facilitate suitable duties? So to help the return to work providers or treating doctors understand the duties and demands of an injured worker's role and what restrictions or capacity they may have, they may need additional information from the employer. So this may include things like a job task analysis or a duties description. Please don't expect that providers and more importantly probably doctors may understand the intricacies of how your business runs. There are many different tasks that are often involved that you really don't understand until you visit a workplace and understand and see it firsthand. So the more information you can provide, the better the plan is that we can develop to help people. But yes, certainly the job task analysis will detail either any critical physical or psychological demands of a role. You may already have a list of potential suitable duties or suggestions within the workplace. It may be a job bank that you already have documented. any training that may be required to participate in alternate duties. So for example, either any training on site if we're starting to upgrade them and they may need a forklift license and they haven't used that or had that skill before, whether we need to help get assistance from WorkCover or that can be trained on site. And certainly referring back to the WorkSafe website, there are various job task analysis that are available for a variety of roles on the WorkSafe website that you can access as well. At times, I've also had employers that have produced past suitable duties that may be useful because, again, it provides an idea of what tasks have been utilised before. And so it's always valuable to store and collate those as an employer as well for various injuries that you may have. So this is an example of a simple job task analysis. You can see it's got all those different types of physical job demands of sitting and walking and climbing and crouching, and then how frequently it's required by the employee throughout the day. And that gives a really good idea of what we need to get the injured worker back to. So this information can be valuable not only for the return to work provider, but certainly sharing it with the doctor who is writing those medical certificates with their tolerances and restrictions, as well as treating physios and psychologists, so that everyone has a really clear understanding of what the injured role looks like.
Okay, so we've talked so far about how we go about identifying suitable duties in a workplace and developing those suitable duties plans. But what do we do if there are no actual suitable duties available in your workplace? So we'll talk about that now. But first, just to get an idea about your own experiences with suitable duties, if you could please quickly answer this poll, which is, do you struggle to find suitable duties in your workplace? Okay, so it looks like around a quarter of you do struggle to find suitable duties in your workplace, and just over half sometimes do, and a quarter don't struggle. So that's a nice even mix, but it certainly looks like a lot of you do struggle from time to time to actually identify those suitable duties that might be available in your workplace, and it's not always easy. But in instances where there are, after we've explored all of those options that we've just talked about with Michelle, there may be cases where it's just not possible due to safety or practical reasons, such as maybe the severity of the person's injury or the type of work that they do, where even after exhausting all those avenues, we can't find suitable duties at the pre-injury workplace. And that's where we can utilise something that we call host employment. But as I mentioned, and as Michelle said, our optimal goal is to actually return an injured worker to their pre-injury employer and their pre-injury role. So we do really try and exhaust all options at their employer, whether it be in the same job or a different job, before we would start exploring these avenues. So that would also include making a referral to a return to work provider to come out and really look at the workplace to see if there's any options available at the workplace. But after we've done those things and it's clear that there are no duties available at that workplace, what we can arrange is to temporarily place an injured worker who has a capacity for work with a host employer, and we call that our Recover at Work program. And a host employer is an employer who is able to provide suitable duties in their workplace, but they also have a track record of successfully supporting their own injured workers through recovery. So employers can nominate to be part of that program who have a good history of safety and return to work, and they can then take on injured workers temporarily to help them build that capacity back for work until the time that they are ready to return to their pre-injury workplace.
So yes, certainly return to work providers are also involved in setting up host employment programs, or HSDPs. You'll sometimes see that abbreviated too. And similar to SDPs, the provider works collaboratively with the injured worker and their treating team to identify host employers. Many injured workers may know of family or friends who have connections for possible host employment programs that we can then formalise and set up as part of the Recover at Work program. You'll also find the return to work providers that WorkCover utilise often will have a list of host employers that we have used in the past, and as Tim said, we know that they have a great track record of assisting injured workers with recovery, that we can reach out and place an injured worker at that location as well. Ideally, host employment is a short-term program initiative to assist with upgrading an injured worker's capacity to be able to resume at their original workplace. I think that's a very clear goal that we always try and reiterate, that it's not you know, an option that should be undertaken until we have exhausted all those suitable duties option at a workplace. You know, certainly when we do go out to workplaces and employers indicate to us that there are no suitable duties, you know, it can be often as challenging as having doctors say that the injured worker has to be 100% fit before they return to work. We'd really like to kind of communicate and work collaboratively to explore all those options before we turn to host, because yeah, it really is an option of a last resort. It can be perceived by the injured worker that their employer may not be as supportive of their return to work if they are being placed at a host employer. But WorkCover certainly with their Recover at Work program have lots of information available on their website about host employment as well.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our slides for today. We have a little bit of time left, which we'll aim to answer your questions now. So if you do have a question for us, take the opportunity to type that into the question box now. But we also have a few questions here that were provided to us through the webinar registration process. So thank you to those people who submitted these questions. So first question, I'll give this one to you, Michelle. We've talked a lot today about physical injuries and people with you know, physical incapacity and that sort of thing. But how do you go about developing suitable duties for a worker with a mental health injury?
Great question. The clear answer is exactly the same as you would for a physical injury. So the same process should be followed. Look at the nature of the injury, the symptoms that the injured worker is experiencing, and then any other workplace kind of symptoms or triggers that we may need to manage or restrict during that suitable duties program. I guess other than looking at the weights, ranges and reach distances, which is more physically orientated, we may be looking at other types of tasks or capacities that might involve cognitive processes, organisation and planning skills of the injured worker, workplace communications, as well as some physical symptoms, because certainly with mental health conditions, injured workers may experience the symptoms of pain, tremor, stiffness, fatigue, even visual changes that we may need to manage and monitor in the suitable duties program. And then also other things like that reporting and support workers who may be available at the workplace to assist the injured worker, but essentially exactly the same as we would develop a physical injury.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this next question I'll also give to you. So how do you write up a suitable duties plan if the doctor does not add any restrictions to the medical certificate?
Yeah, I think we can all agree again, sadly, at times this is our norm, and often this sometimes triggers the return to work providers being involved in the first case, is where we get a very blank or sometimes incomplete medical certificate. Following that same process of doing the initial interview and the workplace meeting, the injured worker will soon provide us with some really valuable information on their current symptoms, their pain and capacity, and their tolerances, which we can utilise to formulate some of that information. Getting additional information from their treating allied health providers. Physios are always terrific, usually to speak with, as are psychologists at times if we have authorities to do so. And then using our knowledge of past experience of injuries and timelines that we would normally expect to see helps to guide how long a suitable duties should go for, how often we should upgrade it. All of that type of information is often known from the experiences that we have along the way. So yeah, certainly storing and keeping some of those suitable duties programs that you've used in the past will provide some really valuable information potentially for future suitable duties as well.
Thank you. Okay, so another one here, and again, as the expert, Michelle, I'll throw this one to you, but this is a scenario that we do come across from time to time, and it's What can an employer do if a doctor or a medical team specifies that a worker is fit to return to work, but the worker is saying that they aren't fit for work or they're not comfortable returning to work?
Yeah, great question as well. And look, I think at the core of how you answer this is looking at that communication process and understanding and inquiring with the injured worker why they're having hesitations about returning to work. It could be a variety of different things, and whether that's understood through a case conference with the treating doctor, with the injured worker, whether we understand that information from a worksite assessment, or whether it's through just an initial assessment that the return to work provider has with the injured worker. We can then start to understand what their hesitations are, and you know, in addition to potentially any red flags. So at times we talk about the flag model of looking if there are any comorbidities or medical factors. There may be some yellow flags, which are the psychological factors, blue flags, which are the work or social factors, or orange flags, which are mental health factors. And I think drilling down and understanding those types of barriers can really help to then understand why an injured worker is hesitating to return to work when their treating team is indicating that they could do so.
Okay. And just finally, so do both parties, such as the worker and the employer, need to sign off on a suitable duties plan? I'll take that one. So I guess as we said at the start, this whole process of developing suitable duties plans and having them be a success is really reliant on that collaboration and that consultation and making sure that everyone is understanding of their roles and responsibilities in the process. So with that in mind, I would say it is a best practice type approach to have the worker and the employer sign off on suitable duties plans. What that does do is just make it really clear what's expected, exactly what the plan is for upgrading and timeframes and things like that. But also adds an element, I guess, of accountability for each party in terms of their roles and responsibilities in the process. So, yeah, I would suggest for best outcomes and best results, we should be having both workers and employers signing off on those suitable duties plans.
Tim, I've just got a question that's come in on the forum. So the question is, can a return to work provider talk to a GP to explain what suitable duties are available at the workplace? Absolutely, yes. Yes, we can. If we can get through the gatekeeper administrator who may be on the front counter, then we absolutely can. Usually, though, we will do that via sending them the suitable duties program. We can send them abbreviated documents. Usually, in my world, we'll have like a one-page limit that we will send to a doctor. Obviously, they're very busy people. But yes, certainly having a telephone conversation where we can explain that the employer is very supportive of return to work and has suitable duties is completely possible and very value add to do that. So
I think in scenarios like that as well, it can be valuable when there are complexities or perhaps challenges or resistance to have the return to work provider plus a rehab coordinator, even the customer advisor, to do a case conference and really just talk through all of the issues and concerns so that everyone's around the table and everyone's on the same page. We find that can be really a helpful process for those more challenging type scenarios as well. Mm. And the worker involved in that, sorry, I should say as well, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Mm. Okay, we're just about at time. So hopefully you've enjoyed that session and it's provided valuable and some practical advice for you in your roles in terms of supporting suitable duties. We might just wrap up now with a few quick key takeaways that we'd like you to take away from this session today. So the first one is around that contacting workers early to start the return to work conversation and get that planning process in motion. We talked about the benefits of early intervention. We talked about how the research is clear that the longer someone's off work, the more difficult it is for them to ever get back to work. And so the really simple advice for employers here is to just keep things simple, make early contact, show that you're supportive and caring of their return to work. And I can tell you what we see on our end is for those employers who do take that approach, the workers themselves get back to work sooner, they get better outcomes, and the employers obviously see the benefits both to their workplace, but also from a claim cost point of view. So early, regular supportive contact is key. Sharing of information. So again, that collaboration process, the more information everyone has, the better the plans that we can develop and the greater chance we have of success. So think about workers' functional job requirements, share them with us at WorkCover or a return to work provider if they're involved, and the treating team as well. That just gives everyone the most amount of information to make sure things are successful. And finally, just reach out to us if you need any assistance. We're mindful that for many employers, having an injury at work is a bit of a daunting or an uncertain sort of time. So don't be afraid to contact us. Our customer advisors all do a great job in terms of working on helping injured workers and employers recover and move on with their life each day. So most of the scenarios that you will come across, they will have encountered before, and will be able to give you really helpful advice in terms of how to keep moving forward to achieve the best outcomes for everyone. So they're our three top takeaways from today's session. Okay, so we're at time. So thank you so much to Michelle for coming along and co-presenting today. It's been really great hearing your expertise and your experience in this space. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And as I mentioned at the start, so this session has been recorded and we will send out a link to you shortly. It'll also be updated to our YouTube channel where you can also find previous webinars that we've done on a range of different topics. And we'd also love your feedback on how you think this session has gone via a short survey as well. If you're interested in attending more of our webinars, keep an eye out for our email updates, our LinkedIn page, or there's the events page on the WorkSafe Queensland website as well. So that's all from us here today. Thank you so much again for coming along, and we appreciate that you taking the time to join us.